Hello YouTube, hello Scruff Tords and everyone else, and probably a couple of pro-Russians will that next will maybe watch this video. Bit unscripted, not really sure. Well, I think I know what I want to talk about. The other day, a pro-Russian visited one of my videos comment sections and said there's nothing wrong with being pro-Russian regarding the war in Ukraine. And I mean, even if you think Russia has legitimate reasons to invade Ukraine and make claims on Ukrainian territory, say there are legitimate reasons. There aren't, none at all, but say there are. That in no way justifies Russia's attacks, deliberate attacks on civilians all across Ukraine. I believe there's something like 12,000 dead civilians at this point in 3 years. Many of which have been killed because Russia has launched strikes at Kyiv, for instance, Lviv, striking civilian targets deliberately, apartment buildings and hospitals and what have you. I mean, nothing justifies those attacks. Nothing. If Russia has legitimate reasons to invade Ukraine, Russia should direct all attacks against military targets, legitimate targets, but they aren't. And this is not made up. All you pro-Russians out there, you need to understand this. It is a well-documented fact that Russia keeps attacking hospitals and medical facilities. They did so for years in Syria and has done it since day one of the war in Ukraine. And we're not talking a couple of dozen hits. We are talking well into the thousands, if not 2,000 to 3,000 targets. Hospitals, medical facilities that have been struck and hit in Ukraine and Syria. These are not mistakes. These are deliberate attacks. Someone has made a decision and given an order to bomb hospitals and medical facilities. And I mean, who are they targeting? The elderly, right? Old people visit hospitals. You have maternity wards. Mothers and babies are being targeted. I mean, people in general who are sick, in need of help, who are injured. All ages, children, men, women, the elderly. They're all being targeted deliberately by Russia. And this is an established fact. This is how Russia wages war. And the UN, the United Nations, they have confirmed it in multiple reports. You can Google this for yourself. You don't need to trust me. You can Google it and read the UN reports yourselves. This is not a secret. It's public information that the United Nations provides to us all. And so now we know for a fact that Russia targets hospitals, the elderly, women and children, maternity wards, children's hospitals. There's a word for that when you target civilians in hopes of changing their minds to suit your political viewpoint. That's called terrorism. Russia is a terrorist state. Putin and his government is a terrorist regime. There's no other way around it. There's no other way to describe it. These are terrorist acts, right? They are targeting civilians with intent to cause terror and fear and panic. That is terrorism. That is not war. That is terrorism. And Russia has been doing it for years, for decades. It is how Russia operates in a conflict. They resort to terrorism. They resort to killing civilians needlessly. There's this thing called collateral damage, such as when Ukraine launches strikes against the Kerch Bridge. A bridge is a legitimate military target. If civilians are nearby and are unfortunately killed in a strike against a bridge, such as the Kerch Bridge, those civilians are considered collateral damage. You may have opinions on that, but it is what it is. But attacking a hospital is not a legitimate target. That is murder. That is terrorism when you target civilians like that. And it's not just hospitals. Apartment buildings all across Ukraine have been targeted by Russian bombs, missiles, and drones. Apartment buildings. That means you have a building with an address and you are targeting all the people living at that address. You're targeting civilians attached to that address that you're bombing. Clear-cut terrorism. Murder. Killing innocent civilians needlessly. Now, here's the thing. Because you are pro-Russians right now as I'm talking, and if you've been listening for this long, your mind is beginning to come up with a rationale to why what I'm saying is false, or why you can dismiss it, or why there's some legitimate reason why Russia can do these attacks. Well, I don't know, NATO hiding in the basement, right? Yeah, because NATO has been hiding in the basement of every hospital and medical facility throughout Syria and Ukraine for the past 10 years. That's not really logical, is it? But as you're now trying to rationalize why this is happening, let's talk about flat earthers. You know what a flat earther is, right? Many times often they are otherwise completely rational people. But for some reason, they think the earth is not a globe, it's flat. And they come up with fantastical theories why that is, ignoring science, ignoring facts, and they keep looking for proof that their fantasies are true. And when they are confronted with science and facts, they do their damnedest to ignore it or to dismiss it, and their brains try to come up with reasons why science is wrong. And that is what's happening with you, the pro-Russians, at this point. You are trying to come up with reasons why the facts are wrong concerning Russia and Russia attacking these hospitals and medical facilities and these apartment buildings. You're trying to justify it, coming up with fantastical reasons why Russia is allowed to do it, or why Russia did it by mistake or whatever, right? you are just like the flat earthers, probably rational people otherwise, but for some reason you have come to the conclusion that Russia is the good guy in this equation, despite all the evidence pointing to the contrary, right? You know what a flat earther is. You understand the concept of there are people out there who believe in ridiculous, ludicrous things, and they will defend it, and they will ignore reality to continue believing this silly lie. And that is where you are at as a pro-Russian. You believe nonsense. You believe made up stories. You believe propaganda. And you think Russia has legitimate reasons to invade Ukraine. I mean, just take a look at who supports Ukraine. All the Western nations, and even more around the globe, supports Ukraine. Countries that allow people the freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, to live their own lives as lesbians, homosexuals, whatever, cross-dressers, to enjoy sports or recreation and whatever it is, right? They're allowed to change sex if they feel like it, change their names and what have you, to have freedom of religion, right? These are the free world is defending Ukraine, supporting Ukraine. Who supports Russia? North Korea, China, and Iran. North Korea isn't exactly known for being big on freedom. It's a horrible, horrible and brutal regime that terrorizes and tortures its own population and starves its own population. China is a country that does not allow freedom of thought. It wants to control every aspect of its citizens' lives. And you want to talk about potentially Nazis in Ukraine? China has concentration camps. If you don't fit the mold of what a Chinese citizen should be, you end up in a concentration camp, right? China has literal concentration camps. And then you have Iran, religious fanatics, fundamentalists that, where you have police checking on how women are dressed. And if the women aren't dressed properly, they can get fines or can end up in jail or get whiplashes as a punishment and what have you. I mean, these are the countries that are supporting Russia. A country that we know for a fact targets civilians with their bombs. And they receive weapons and ammunition from Iran, China, and North Korea. And these three countries, they know what Russia is doing with these weapons. They know their weapons and their ammunition is being used to kill civilians, right? There is no rationale to explain how these countries are somehow the good guys, right? There is no way to do it except if you have the flat earth mentality, right? If you are pro-Russian, you are the flat earthers of the geopolitical debate. You believe a ridiculous story. And when you're confronted with reality, you shut your eyes to it and you come up with weird, strange theories why reality is false. just like the flat earthers. So I'm sorry. No, you can't be pro-Russian and claim you are a good guy. If you are pro-Russian, you support Russia bombing maternity wards as a matter of strategy. Bombing hospitals, killing the elderly, killing the sick, killing babies and mothers. You are justifying that when you say you are pro-Russian. You're saying you're fine with it. You're saying you're fine with murder and you're fine with terrorism. And for no reason whatsoever. Russia had no reason to invade Ukraine. Ukraine was moving towards aligning with with Western Europe, with the EU, and potentially NATO. Russia felt that was a threat. So they decided to do something about it, just like they did with Georgia, just like they did with Chechnya, right? And like they're planning on doing to Moldova. Same thing. When these countries decide they want to move to align with the West, Russia comes down hard with military might and kills civilians. On top of it all, Ukraine has vast amounts of natural resources that Russia wants, obviously, right? And I'm sure some of you Vatniks are going to go, well, United States this, United States that. And yeah, you know what? As soon as Western media or the UN or Amnesty or whatever points out that the US has messed up somewhere in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Guantanamo Bay or wherever, you treat Western media and the UN as credible sources, right? Whenever they report that the United States has done something horrible somewhere, you trust these sources, Western media and the United Nations and Amnesty International and so on. Why don't you trust them when they're talking about Russia and this war and in Syria? It's the flat earth mentality. Reality hits you in the face and you try and come up with reasons why it's false, why it's wrong, because it confronts your worldview, what you think the world is, or how you think the world works, right? So, all you pro-Russians, you have to understand, you are flat earthers. You believe a ridiculous lie, and you refuse to accept reality. So, anyway, that's it. I'm gonna have a cup of coffee, and I hope I'll see you all the next time. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine. Give them hell.